are we raising like just narcissistic people that become entitled? Or if you think about it another way, is it just like unmet needs that kind of rolls over into like that sense of entitlement? Because I never got my needs met. You owe me this now. Everyone owes me because so that is kind of like the balance. If you think about entitlement, is like, okay, yes, they present themselves sometimes as narcissistic because everything's all about me, my way. Everyone owes me everything, and that's just the way it is. Or is it possible that these adults or even, teens, have unmet needs?
Right, because it may not be entitlement. It may be that my needs have never been met, and now I have, authority or control to get those needs met. I could.
But also, it comes down to, I had somebody say, well, this child, of course, I always go developmental. Where are we talking about? Which, and it's like, well, this child is just, seeking attention. I said, yeah, there's a reason, because they're not getting it. And in the correct way, that nature versus nurture. I put a roof over your head. I do this. You don't have any problems, but you don't see me, And so that's the thing. So we do talk about the entitlement. Everybody goes into narcissism, like that root.
That is so over that term.
I tell my students first day, I don't want to hear narcissist, I don't want to hear racist, and I don't want to hear trigger.
And gaslighting.
Gaslighting. Yeah, those I said, stop. I said buzzwords. I said, let's sit first with the needs not being met. So when you talk about that, Nella, like give me a little for instance with that.
So for instance, if a child, like let's say the child that you were just talking about, is growing up in a household where their needs are not getting met. So, yes, maybe their basic needs, they're getting shelter and food and water and whatever, but are they getting like their emotional needs met by their parents, by, their other environmental, like, teachers, things like that. So all they're doing the entire time is constantly asking and grasping at to get that attention and to get their needs met. And they never can. So once they get old enough, then they know how to verbalize it, right? Because children don't really know how to verbalize what their needs are. So then they get to a certain age and they're like, you know what? I never got this as a kid. You were a crappy parent. You were, a bad teacher, or everyone was out to get me because of whatever reason. And that turns into then everyone owes me everything now.
And right? They're going about it the wrong way.
Exactly.
Right.
Because that's what I was going to say, because they've never learned. And so their behaviors are so maladaptive. But wouldn't that also go into self-fulfilling prophecy? We create what we want the most. Like, I am so afraid of being abandoned and rejected that I'm going to create a situation to where you will never abandon me or reject me. But in the end, because it is so maladaptive, I have to be abandoned and rejected. And so again, it's like, can we fix that? Because yes, development in children, but then we see it, in partnerships. Oh my gosh, we all do couples. And, it's, well, he and she, I go, whoa. Not about him, not about her. It's not about him, it's not about her. And a lot of times, some of the research I've done, it said that, children of trauma are always looking for, healing in places that have nothing to do with it. Of course, we talk about like if we've got daddy issues or mommy issues, we'll find, a male partner and then put our trauma from dad onto him and want him to take care of it. And the same thing with mom. So the sad part is the other side. They really want to give they love these people, but they're like, I don't even know how to do this.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I know you do a ton of like with women empowerment. And so like, have you seen that with some of your?
Absolutely. Especially in women who, I call it daddy issues. Like they have daddy issues. And then what their fathers didn't do, they expect their husbands to do or their partners to do. And it's like, you can't expect that. I always say, what hurt you wasn't your responsibility to fix, but the healing is your responsibility. You can't go back to the past to change the past, but you have every right now and every mean available to you to start to make that happen for you. How do you want to see it? How do you want to be? Start making those changes in those areas so that you won't put your unmet needs on someone else to meet when it's not their issue.
Right. And even with that, like their unmet needs, it's finding it too in the wrong places. So they don't know what a healthy relationship looks like with the father. Let's say, like you said, daddy issues, that term. They're seeking, since they didn't get that attention and the needs met from their father, they're looking at any male figure or a much older man to
Absolutely.
give them that loving, that taking care of me, because they didn't feel taken care of by their dad, or they felt abandoned
Absolutely.
by their dad.
And some of my clients, they realize that now because, okay, say they grew up with the absenteeism of their father. And now they, of course, they have these daddy issues. And then they get into these relationships, they get married, they have kids, they think that they got what they want. And then 10 or 20, 30 years later, maybe the kids are growing out of the house, they realize this isn't what I want. The only reason why I chose this is because I was still looking for someone out of the traumatic eye. Like, I'm still in pain, I'm still dealing with this trauma, and I'm choosing someone who's actually carrying the trauma on into this relationship or continuing to, produce trauma, and not realize it until, like years later. And they're like, this is my dad, but it's in the form of my husband.
And going back to, generational, where we are now, and I wish I could show it in here. I saw because, we're into TikTok, which I'm so not great. I have like 4 friends. Don't try to friend me because I don't know how to do it. But anyway, I have 4. But I saw this thing. I literally showed it to my students. And we were talking about, because I'm always trying to get them to understand, like, it was different. And the lack of connection. So, like it said, from where people spend their time, from 1936 to 2024, it's unbelievable. And from 2010, friends and family and everything else went to online. And then from 10 to 20, it's literally 67% of all people now all over are isolated and online. And so where am I going with that is that because of the almost complete break of family systems, we used to always see, like y'all said, daddy issues. She's now looking for either an older man or whatever. But now we're having these young people that are going, I hate men. I must be a lesbian. Or same thing with, some of our young men that, whatever's happening, well, I must be over here. So there's a lot happening there too. A lot of my young people are really struggling with their identity. And, they think it must be this or it must be that. And so, we all have to look at too is even the connections and lack of connections. Because again, Nell and I were talking the other day about getting some of our younger generations in here, to do some of our guest spots, because it is so different than when we grew up. Our foundational system was like everybody pretty much had a mom and a dad and whatever, dog named Bill. And then we see that. But now it's like, even if they have that, they don't have that because they're not even connecting on any level with anybody, And so the entitlement, I think that so many of these kids are having now is like, I don't even know what anything is. And so we say entitled because we have a foundation. A lot of these kids don't have that. And so it's like, they have no idea anything that makes sense, And so it's like, well, I'm going to get that because you owe me that, or like you said, or this is this law, but that's what that says, but they're missing the human experience of it. Right. So it's just like, how do we break that down again? And you talked about narcissism, which we know, the self-reflection. Another crazy thing I read something that said people were not born to see their own reflections. Isn't that interesting? Mirrors and all that stuff, because that's why you operated from your heart, you operated from who you are, but nobody paid attention to really how they looked, And so now that's the only thing that matters, especially with younger generations, is that look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. But it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, a lot of attention seeking for sure.